Yes. Yep. We're sort of in the middle, or in the middle of a subject, so we'll just a moment of review. We'll finish, and then we'll move on to the next section here. Okay, so we were in the middle of discussing how the difference between angels and souls, and that's corresponds to the difference between the two worlds of Bria and Yetzira. And that's why usually the place of the souls is in Bria, and the place of angels is Yetzira, right? Because Bria is more intellectual, whereas Yetzira is more emotional. And angels are like animals that can't control or change their emotions, whereas souls, with the advantage of having intellect, can control, have free choice. In other words, they can control their emotions, and they also have the ability to change their emotions through intellect, through meditation. We did mention, though, and that's what we're going to sort of continue here for a little bit, is that there are angels that rise to the level of Bria, in other words, that have intellectual emotions too. And there are souls, actually, probably a majority of souls, that are in the world of Yetzira because primarily they don't employ or even can't employ to the fullest extent their intellect to completely change their emotions. Like the Beinoni, we can't really change our emotions. We do have the ability to control them. We do have the ability to employ our intellect to sort of modify or to, right? If you're a passionate person and your passion is towards negative things, you could, with a lot of hard work, change your passion towards positive things. What's almost impossible for a Beinoni to do is change your character to not be a passionate person. That's where changing emotions comes in. To change your essence, your emotion itself, that you should become less passionate, that's problematic, so to speak. In other words, that's you won't necessarily be successful. Okay, so let's see here. On 555, we're speaking about the souls and the fact that so we're addressing a question here. This is where we left off last week. The question was, if we said that the difference between souls and angels is that angels are like animals in Yetzira, that they are the way they are the way they're created, they can't change. Whereas souls are in Bria and they can change, that's the difference. If most souls are really in Yetzira, let's assume, for argument's sake, us, if we are on the same level of angels, that means we're on the same level of animals. So what makes us greater than angels? In what way are we, as lower level souls, different than angels? What's our advantage? Why should we think that we can possibly change? Okay? So that's what we're addressing here. However, this statement that the abode of tzaddikim who serve God with intellectual love and fear, remember, because intellectual love and fear is a love and fear that you created and you control, you can, that's in your possession, so to speak, is in the world of Bria, applies only to those souls which are actually on the level of neshama. Remember, we had the 5 levels of the neshama. The level of neshama being that of intellect. As the verse states, the divine neshama will give them this discernment, and which represent a superior intellectual perception of the blessed Ein Sof. So, how many of us fit this description? Not even all tzaddikim fit this description. Remember, we are, again, without being judgmental, we're just going to assume, because a majority of souls are not tzaddikim, we're going to assume that we're not tzaddikim. We are the level of nefesh. Tzaddikim are divided between ruach and neshama. Did you listen to the recording? Okay, so we have the 5 levels of the soul. Chaya and Yechida, the highest 2 levels, don't really come into this world on a regular basis. They're Shabbos and Yom Kippur, holidays, etc. But the average person can access Three levels: nefesh, ruach, neshama. Tzaddikim access ruach and neshama, whereas the average person primarily is nefesh, more action-based, not so much emotion-based or even intellect, especially not intellect-based. So even within tzaddikim, only intellectual tzaddikim are on the level of bria. Okay? But the tzaddikim who are at the level of ruach, so this is still not us. This is still tzaddikim, but they're at the level of ruach. And similarly, obviously, all the other souls of Israel, all of us, who served God with a natural fear and love, hidden in the heart of all Israel, not with love and fear born of intellect. So all of us, we are primarily not in Bria. We ascend thereto, in other words, to Bria, only on Shabbat and the new moon. In other words, Rosh Chodesh, when all creation ascends to a higher level. As it is written, every month on the new moon and every week on the Shabbat, all flesh will come to prostrate themselves before me, says God. It is only then that these souls ascend to the world of Bria, the higher Garden of Eden. So in other words, on Shabbat and holidays, we are on the level of neshama. We are higher than angels. By means of how do we elevate? How do we go up? What's the elevator? What's the mechanism through which we elevate from one world to the next? By means of the pillar that extends from the lower Garden of Eden, Yetzirah, to the higher Garden of Eden. In other words, the world of Bria, which is called the higher Garden of Eden. Okay, this is mystical. We're not going to get into this. You could look later at the footnote. By means of this pillar, these souls ascend thereto to delight in God and to bask in the radiance of the Shekhinah. Why? Because the intellect of a created being delights and derives pleasure only in that which it conceives, understands, and knows, corresponding to Chabad, and grasps with its intellect and understanding. Right? True pleasure can only come if you understand something. Now, you can enjoy a magic trick even though you don't understand how it works, right? Why? Because in your mind, it's magic. What do you understand? You think it's miraculous. Your intellect tells you it's miraculous. When you learn the trick and now you know how it's done, are you as excited? No. Why? Because since when did a non-miraculous thing excite you? When I tell you, now I just told you something good, you smiled, you enjoyed it, right? Because it's a new thing. But if I tell you the same joke 3 times, you're going to stop laughing, right? Because you know it already. We as humans, we get true pleasure from understanding. Okay? When you see a flying car, sure, it's exciting. But true pleasure comes when you understand how it works. Yeah? Even though the miraculous element is gone, you may appreciate how the magician does the trick because he had a good technique. And it's amazing. You may be even more impressed once you figure out how to do it. If it's a lousy trick, a simple thing, you'll be bummed. But if it's a genius thing, you'll be amazed even more than if it's magic because now you understand it. And it's clever, it's brilliant. Okay? So because usually we are not emotional or intellectual about our actions, we don't really enjoy it. Yeah? When do we really enjoy the mitzvahs that we do? When we understand it, when we connect it. When does that happen? On Shabbos and holidays, when our souls elevate to a higher level of Bria. Now, how much can I enjoy when I go to a magic show, when I go to a comedy, when I go to a lecture? How much of the lecture am I going to enjoy? The parts you understand. Okay, so I give a class, 20 people in the class. Last night on Zoom, there were certain parts where I could see people smile, and other people didn't, either because they weren't paying attention or because they didn't understand what everyone else. They may have understood something, yeah, but it didn't touch their intellect in the same way, and so it didn't provoke, it didn't invoke, it didn't bring out that same level of pleasure. Okay, so. Now, so imagine if a tzaddik is in Bria and you on Shabbos go up to Bria, are you going to understand as much as he did?
No.
No. So you won't be smiling as much as he will, right? As much as it can grasp of the blessed Ein Sof light through his wisdom and his understanding, which radiate there in Bria. enabling the soul to perceive godliness. For as mentioned earlier, the Chabar of Atzilut, which we'll talk about soon, to which the Alter Rebbe refers as his wisdom, his understanding, in other words, God's understanding, radiate in Bria, for which reason Bria is the world of understanding. So even though Bria is already a creation, but the main part of godliness that radiates in Bria is intellect. We're gonna continue a little bit more. Let's do the next page, and then we'll stop and.
So is Bina understanding, or is that knowledge?
It's translated differently in different places. Chachma, the way.
Let's go back.
That's what I'm saying. In different places, it's translated to different things. Here he says, conceives, understands, and knows. Yeah.
So that would be the Bina part.
Understands would be the Bina part. Yeah. Now, these souls who, the second paragraph on 557, these souls who served God with natural love and fear, in other words, us, the love and fear we invoke when serving God is the one we're born with. We didn't spend years meditating and understanding God and developing love and fear. So these souls are privileged to rise occasionally to Bria. And that's higher than the angels. So therefore, even though usually we're on the same level of angels, hence our question, what differentiates us? Yeah, but Shabbos and holidays, we're able to rise above. So the angels whose abode is in Yetzirah, as mentioned above, they never rise to Bria. Although they too, like the angels, in other words, us, our souls, like the angels, served God only with natural fear and love. So why then is their service of God considered superior to that of the angels? Yeah. Why do we get to rise up to Bria on Shabbos and holidays? And why are we considered goers, walkers amongst those who stand if we're on the same level of angels? We also only serve God with our natural love and fear. Because through their fear and love, in other words, through our fear and love, the Sitra Achara, clothed in their body, is subdued. We actually accomplished something with our natural love and fear. The angels don't have klipa to subdue. They have no resistance to their natural love and fear. I want to ask you, you may have thought I was crazy when I said we all serve God with our natural love and fear. You're saying natural love and fear? No, for so many years I didn't, or for so many times I'm not interested. So what do you mean natural love and fear? Of course I brought out love. Yeah. Remember we spoke about in the beginning in chapters 18 that there's a natural love and fear that you have to reveal. But when you reveal that love, when you wake up, or when you're ready to get out of the house 10 o'clock to come to the Tanya class, I'm sure there are weeks you have a little voice that says, maybe not this week. Okay? An angel doesn't have that little voice. So even though the method you use to break, to fight that voice is the natural love and fear, like an animal, right? An animal only uses their natural love and fear. An angel only uses we also only use our natural love and fear. But we're using our natural love and fear to fight and to subdue klipa. Whether in the case of fear in the realm of turning away from evil, so refraining from doing evil, from doing a sin, and thereby conquering and crushing their desires through not giving their illicit desires expression in thought, speech, and action. So our example was doing something positive. The same thing as doing something negative. Or whether in the case of love, subduing the Sitra Achra in the realm of doing good, as mentioned above. In other words, actively pursuing the observance of the mitzvot out of love of God, despite the contrary desire of the animal soul, which is rooted in the Sitra Achra. So my soul wants to sleep in, my animal soul wants to sleep in, my godly soul wants to worship God out of love, and I managed to subdue the animal soul. That's an amazing thing that an angel has never done. These souls, so therefore us, while in the physical world have freedom of choice. They might have chosen evil, God forbid, at times, yet they chose good, at times, to subdue the Sitra Achra so that God's glory be elevated in all worlds, with an elevation similar to the superiority of light emerging from darkness over ordinary light, as mentioned above. This is connected to class last night. By dispelling the darkness of Sitra Achra, these souls added to the light of holiness. Okay, so even though it's true on a basic level, we have the same tendencies, sort of DNA as angels, our souls, our lower level souls, and therefore there shouldn't be anything that distinguishes us from angels. At the same time, because we are able, so and that brings to light, when we started this whole conversation last week, we pointed out that there are two advantages of souls over angels. One is the intellectual element, that I can control and change, that I can change my emotions, but there was another element, free choice, that I can choose to negate my natural inclinations even without changing them. That angels don't have. Because they don't have negative forces pulling them in the other direction. They don't need it.
They don't have that, but they do have souls.
They are souls.
They are souls.
Well, they're spiritual beings. They're not souls. Souls are different. Souls are higher, right? That's what we're saying. We're trying to say that souls are on a higher level than angels. But they're all creations of God. Actually, that brings us to today's class. Because today we're going to go a level higher. We're going to see that souls really are a totally different totally different concept than angels. Till now, we're like sort of comparing them. We're just saying souls have an advantage. They're higher. Let's take this a step further. A riddle. Is it possible? No. I'll state the statement because I don't want a yes or no question. What creation existed before it was created? And how is that possible? Let's skip the second part for a minute. What creation existed before it was created? The Torah. In what way did the Torah exist? And in what way was it created that it existed before it was created?
It was in God's mind, if you will.
Okay, so when was it created? I asked if there's something that was existed before. God always existed, but God was never created. There was never a point where God was created. I'm asking for something that at some point was created. But before that, it also existed. And I'm not talking about created like a table, because the tree existed before the table. The table wasn't created, the table was formed. I'm asking for something that existed before it was created. You won't say a tree was created, you'll say it grew. Why? It grew out of the seed. Because if you'll say it was created, it's not true. It existed in potential in the seed. I'm asking for something that was created. And just to give you a hint, we actually mentioned it last week. Not clearly, I didn't present it like this, but it's something we're speaking about. And we mentioned the proof, the basis for this riddle. I'll give you a second hint. We say it every morning in the morning prayers. The soul. Okay. Do you remember from watching the class what might be the proof, or what might be the giveaway that that's what it is, without guessing, because that's what we're talking about.
That's
Close.
that our soul has been revived.
So if you remember, we discussed that there's modani is really a substitute for a blessing, because there's a blessing for modani that we say after we wash our hands. But because when you wake up in the morning, you can't say the blessing, so they gave us a shortened version that we could say first thing when we get up.
Is this the word of God that you're talking about?
No, the word of God isn't the creation.
But it existed.
Right, but it was never created. I'm asking for something that was created, but it existed before it was created.
Well,
It's an oxymoron, technically, right? It doesn't make sense. It can't be. And yet, we read last week, I read to you from the Siddur, that that's the way it's described.
yeah, 'cause the soul is created, then formed, then breathed into you.
Oh, but what was it before it was created? Remember what it says? You know the blessing. My God, the soul which you have given within me is pure. You have created it. And what did we say? Now, it sounds like it's pure. You created a pure thing. But what did we discuss last week? That these four levels, pure, created, formed, and breathed, are the four worlds. Created is Bria, formed is Yetzira, breathed within me is Asiya, because that's where it actually connects. So what's pure? Atzilus, which means that the soul existed in a pure form before it was created. Because it's only created in Bria. Right? But in order to understand this, because we're going to talk today about Atzilus, I don't know, I mentioned this, we had it in more than one JLI course, that the Alter Rebbe, when he would say Atzilus or write it, sometimes he wasn't able to say the whole word. He would just say Atzi. He couldn't finish it. You'll see today why.
So it existed in Atsilos before it was created in Bria.
It was pure in Atzilus, it existed, and then in Bria it says you created it.
Well, he created it, but then what's since you created it and then formed it?
Because remember, created is the matter, but not necessarily is it formed in a specific way. That's a step down. What? What? Right. So a tree can be worth a lot of money. A good tree can be worth a lot of money because there's infinite possibilities of what you can make out of the tree. And yet, what do you pay more for, the tree or the products you produce from the tree?
The products.
The tree had infinite possibilities. I made $20 tables out of the tree. I could have made $1,000 tables out of the tree. Yeah?
Okay.
But you end up paying more for the $20 tables you got out of the tree than the whole tree itself. Otherwise, you wouldn't, right?
Right.
Why? Each one has an advantage. The tree itself, because it's only the matter, it's only a creation without form, there's much more possibilities of what you could turn it into. Once it's formed, now it's stuck. But there's an advantage that now it's more yours. There's more personality in it. There's more of the artist in it. People pay a lot of money for that. Yeah. Okay. But that's a separate. In order to understand what's Atzilus and how that differentiates from the other worlds that we spoke more about last week, for a moment, I want to talk about something that we refer to as, I'm going to use the Hebrew terms. I don't know of a very good English translation. In other words, there's a literal English translation that we use, but there's the internals and the externals. Pnimiyut and chitzoniyut. The root is panim. Panim could mean face, but it also means innards, like the inside. Your face expresses what you're thinking, what you're feeling, the inside, more than other parts of your body. And then there's chitzon, chutz. Chutz means external, outside. So in a person, what does that mean? We would usually divide our internals, not the organs, because that's external to the soul. So you have the soul itself. My hands are external to the soul. Even my thought process is a tool that the soul uses to express itself. My speech, my actions, my feelings, my intellect, these are all tools that the soul uses to express itself. A baby has a developed brain, and it doesn't understand 2 + 2 is 4. It's not the brain that understands it. It's the soul. The soul uses the brain, the physical brain, right? So if my eyes, if someone, God forbid, is born blind, yeah, does that mean their soul can't see?
No.
It means their physical eyes can't see. And that's why doctors look for remedies. They don't look for remedies to the soul. They look for remedies to the physical eye. And sometimes they could do a procedure and then the eye sees suddenly. That means that the soul the whole time was able to see. It just didn't have the tool with which to express itself.
The shades were drawn all the time.
Yeah. The same thing is true in the world, right? This world, the world we live in, is the world of Asiya. It's the physical Asiya. We discussed this last week. So we said it last week, every world has the 10 Sefirot. So this world has the 10 Sefirot, but when you look outside, do you see 10 Sefirot? No. You see trees, you see buildings, you see people, you see animals. That's the tools. That's the external. That's the creation. But the world we know has a soul, the 10 Sefirot, which express itself in the 10 utterances that God spoke in the world into being, etc. Every world has this, has the internals and the externals, or the soul and the body, or God and creation. In other words, there's the divine Sefirot in every world. That's an expression of godliness. And then there's what's created. So we know that in Yetzirah there are angels. In Bria there are souls. These are creations. They're not God itself. It's a creation. But in the same world of Bria, there's also 10 Sefirot. That's an expression of godliness. Okay? Notice that we're differentiating between God and the creations. We're saying it's two separate things. It's an independent entity. Now, not for real, but that's how we perceive it. That's how they perceive themselves. Souls, angels, they perceive themselves as separate entities. And that's why they love God. When someone says they love themselves, what do they mean usually by that? Usually they mean something about themselves. When you love someone else, and you learn how to express love to someone else, I don't think you would compare that to the love you love yourself. Do you ever buy yourself flowers? Try buying yourself flowers, and this is assuming you know how to buy someone else flowers. In other words, you have someone, if you have someone you love that you buy flowers for, try buying yourself flowers and see if it makes you feel the same way. It probably doesn't. Even if it makes you feel good, it probably doesn't give you that same feeling. Right? By definition, when I love something, it's something external. By definition. Now, if I can prove I love myself, 99%, I'm 99% sure what you'll find if you dig deep enough is that you love something about yourself. You love perhaps the joke you came up with, or you love the job you did on building something, or you may even love your ability at something. That's not yourself. Remember, when you love your kids, you don't love anything about them. You may hate everything about them. You may be annoyed at everything they do, especially at certain ages. There's nothing to love about anything. And yet you love them, and perhaps in a revealed way more than you love yourself. In other words, anything about you, that's not you. There's a separation. So in every world, we have the 10 Sefirot, we have the world, in other words, the creations within the world, and it's just levels of separation. So in Bria, a majority of the world of Bria feels the godliness. There's very little separation. Yetzirah, it's more. Asiya, it's more. And in our Asiya, we almost don't see God. The separation is almost ultimate. But we didn't discuss world number one. It's a world, which means there are the 10 Sefirot, and then there are creations. But the next world is creation. So in this world, Atzilus, even though there are things, they're not creations. They're vessels, they're something that's not the 10 Sefirot, and yet they're 100% one with the Sefirot. Otherwise, it's not a world. If it's just 10 Sefirot without vessels, then it's not a world. It's just God. In order to be a world, it has to have something else. But God hasn't created anything yet. There isn't anything yet outside of him. So there isn't an independent entity. But if we're giving it a name and we're giving it a title, that means it's not God himself. So what is it? Atzilut. Now, how would you describe the word Atzilut? I don't mean just a literal translation. So literally, it means very close to, or He'etzil means it almost projected. The what? Blowing forth. Okay, so for example, the word is used in the Torah when Moses complains to God, the Jewish people complain to him, we want meat. Moses says, where am I supposed to get meat for them from? So what does God say? God doesn't say, okay, you're right. You're too spiritual to worry about their meat. I'll get someone else to take care of the spiritual needs. That's really what Moses is saying. Moses is saying, I'm giving them the Torah. How am I supposed to worry about their meat? Moses took them out of Egypt. Moses gave them manna. Through Moses, manna came down every day. What's Moses so worried about giving them meat? Why can't he give them meat? God can't perform a miracle to give them meat. Moses is saying, this is what they want. They saw you at the sea. They saw you at Sinai. They got the Torah, and they care about meat. How am I supposed to stoop to their level to give in to their silly desires, their temptations? So God doesn't say, you're right, let's try to uproot these temptations. Or you're right, let's let someone else deal with it. What does God say? God says, gather 70 elders, bring them to you, and I will almost like project some of your spirit onto them, and they will help you deal with the pettinesses of the people. So who's dealing with the pettinesses of the people? The sages or Moses? Well, you're both right? Physically, it's the sages, but spiritually, it's Moses. It's Moses. Why is it Moses? Moses himself couldn't get down to that level. So why didn't God? So that means you need someone on a lower level. So then why couldn't the sages do it? What God was saying was everything needs to come through Moses. But because you want something Moses can't get down to, so to speak, so I will take the spirit of Moses, give it to someone else, and they won't be able to do anything. If that spirit left, they couldn't do a thing. It's the spirit of Moses that produces the meat. But the spirit of Moses in Moses is too refined, is too elevated, and can't get down to that level. So I need to take this level of Moses and get it down to where it could produce the meat. In other words, the 10 Sefirot in Atzilus are just the Spirit of God, so to speak. They're just an emanation from God. It hasn't yet been attached to the 70 sages in the metaphor. When does it become attached to the 70 sages? In Bria. Now God creates a world. And remember, what's the soul of the world? The 10 Sefirot. Where did the 10 Sefirot come from? Atzilus. In other words, the 10 Sefirot of Atzilus come into Bria. They become the soul of Bria. Now Bria can have creations and have a soul. Okay, the primary element is intellect. But then the 10 Sefirot of Atzilus go further down into Yetzirah. It's the same 10 Sefirot, but now it's on a lower level. It goes down, 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 until it comes to Asiyah. But in Atzilus, there is no separation between the soul and the body. There is a body, otherwise it's not a world, but there is no separation. So when I asked you the question, who gave the meat to the Jews, the sages or Moses? So we said both, right? But we realized that it's really Moses because it's his spirit, right? Who gave the Jews the Torah? Moses' body or Moses' soul? Based on what we just said, you would say Moses' soul, because the body is only there to facilitate the soul, right?
Right.
But in Atzilus, there is no separation between body and soul. So someone who's from the level of Atzilus, their body is the same as the soul. And that's why. What did God tell Miriam when she dared to speak about Moses? He said, what do you know about Moses? You know nothing about Moses. What do you think he did something I didn't tell him to do? Right? When her and Aaron spoke about the Moses separation. God didn't tell Miriam, oh, sorry for not telling you. Moses is too humble to tell you, so I'll tell you that I told him. God tells Miriam, he's on a totally different level. I speak to him in a different way. He's from Atzilus. There is no separation between body and soul. Moses isn't capable of making a decision I think so separate from God. I could say I love God. Moses can't say I love God because there is no I.
Is Moses a part of God?
No. Atzilus is a world. Atzilus is not God. It has a name, right? All the names we give to God, Yud K Vav K, all represents Atzilus. Remember, if it was God himself, it wouldn't have 10 Sefirot. God isn't limited to that. So it is a world.
But Moses can go beyond because, like, for instance, he hit the rock instead of talking to the rock.
Right.
So therefore, he didn't do what God said.
Because he's a human. He didn't. He's a human. Even a tzaddik isn't protected from making a mistake and choosing to make a
Right.
mistake. Fine. And why did he do it? It says every time Moses got angry, got upset, he ended up making a mistake. He got upset. The Jewish people are complaining, well, 40 years God took care of you and you're still worried? He got angry. So he made a mistake. He's a human being.
Yeah, but it was a pretty bad one, considering the fact that was the reason why he was never allowed to go.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's not the point. The point is that we can't judge because we can't even understand such a person. Our forefathers are referred to as a chariot to God. You know what a chariot is?
Physically,
What is a chariot physically?
it's a battle wagon.
A wagon. Have you ever seen a wagon do anything without a human or an animal getting involved?
No,
A chariot is an inanimate thing. It doesn't have a mind of its own. So what type of praise is it to say that our forefathers were a chariot to God? That's like the lowest thing you could be, inanimate.
Carrying the concept of God and transmitting it.
What the Zohar means when it says they were a chariot to God means they had no will, nothing outside of what God wanted of them. So when they wanted something, you knew this is what God wanted because they were a chariot. They had no independent existence. What did God say about Moses? He was the most humble person to ever live. What does that mean? That he thought he was nothing? He took the Jews out of Egypt. He gave them the Torah. He didn't know that. But it wasn't him.
it was
He
God.
gave zero credit to himself, not 0.001% credit, not anything. It wasn't him. It was him. It wasn't him. It was him, but he wasn't anything separate from God. Again, we can't even imagine this because we come from a different world. Remember, worlds are not somewhere else. It's a different sphere. It's a whole different mode of consciousness. Let's bring it back to us. When I do a mitzvah, there's me and there's the mitzvah, right? When I study Torah, there's me and there's the Torah I study, right? That's like the body and the soul. The soul is the Torah, the godliness is the Torah. I am the body. I'm studying the Torah. So if I study the Torah with such devotion to God and such love and awe of God, then my works may end up on a Torah bookcase, in a Torah book and on a Torah bookcase. If I have my own invested interests and so then it probably won't end up on the Torah shelf. Does that mean I didn't study Torah? I did study Torah. The Torah has become less part of me. But even if I study Torah to the greatest degree, there's still me and the Torah. I don't become one with the Torah. I become connected to the Torah. Connected means the two things that come connected. But I don't become one with the Torah. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who it says he was someone that became one with the Torah. So he said about himself that basically became one with God. How could someone say that about themselves? It's not for today. You study the Zohar, you'll figure it out. But the point is that from a mystical perspective, it's possible for someone to reach that level. Someone that his soul comes from Atzilus. The average person, we come from a world of creation or even formation. So it's not possible for us to get there. But is it never possible for us to experience that? Let's see.
Good question. If
Yeah.
you're studying, and you have the Huff Cup, and you're so one with the Torah, and I think we covered it in the earlier chapters, that it becomes part of you, it's ingrained, and you're thinking about it, it's in your brain, and that's the connection part. Right?
Yeah.
But it's still not that level that it's actually one.
Right, because you still say, I understood it. You still walk away from it a minute later and think about something that has nothing to do with it. If you would become one with it, you'd never stop thinking about it. If you become one with God when studying Torah, you never stop thinking about it. Because once you think about something else, that means you're not one with it.
Well, even a tzaddik doesn't become one with God
Why not?
because
What does the tzaddik think about besides God?
he's still human.
Okay, so what is he thinking about that's not God?
I'm hungry.
Okay, but why is he hungry?
Guess he figures he has to eat. Right, you said he has to eat this.
Exactly. So a tzaddik that eats because he's hungry is not a tzaddik. That's not the definition of a tzaddik. Definition of a tzaddik is that 100% of his life revolves around God. So we learned in Tanya in chapter 30 something, I think, or maybe 20 something, that there was a sage who said when he was hungry and was going to eat, I'm going to do a favor to this body because God wants me to feed it with, God wants me to elevate sparks. I'm going to do it a favor. In other words, I'm going to do what God wants me to do now. I don't need to eat. Why do I need to eat? What do I need? I don't need anything.
Is that why a tzaddik is a soul that God made a tzaddik? You can't be a Beinanin and become a tzaddik.
Right. In other words, the Beinani and the tzaddik have two different types of souls. The Beinani has the same soul as the Rasha, but the Rasha gives in to his animal soul and therefore commits sins and is a Rasha. The Beinani controls his urges and doesn't commit a sin, so he's a Beinani. But he has those urges.
Yeah.
A tzaddik doesn't have those urges. It's a whole different world.
So you're born a tzaddik.
Not necessarily, but you're born with the soul of a tzaddik. Yes, you cannot. If you're not born with the soul of a tzaddik, you cannot become a tzaddik. However, we did mention at the end of chapter 14, I believe, that if someone works hard their whole life, God might give them a gift and give them the sort of like a spirit of a tzaddik soul also, so that they'll have to fight less, perhaps. But that's something that's gifted by God. It's not something you can achieve on your own. That's true, yes. A tzaddik is not, so again, a tzaddik might not be born a tzaddik. A person can become a tzaddik because, for the beginning of their life, they have other urges, but they're able, like King David, right? King David committed a sin. So what does it mean he was a tzaddik? He writes in Psalms, through fasting, he killed his animal soul. In other words, because he had the soul of a tzaddik, he was able to convert his animal soul that it shouldn't have those urges. The average person can't do that. We don't have that power because we only have the soul of a Beinani or of a Rasha. I just want to read something here that will help us understand a little bit. It says in Ethics of Our Father, it says like this. Chapter 4, Mishnah 17. He used to say, 1 hour of repentance and good deeds in this world is better than all the life of the world to come. Before I get to the Seifa, to the end of the Mishnah. Okay, 1 hour of repentance and good deeds in this world is better than all the life of the world to come. So what's better, this world or the next world? This world. Even 1 hour in this world. So why do we prolong someone's life, even if they're in pain? Because 1 moment in this world could be more valuable than your whole afterlife. Nice Mishnah? Okay. And 1 hour of bliss in the world to come is better than all the life in this world. So which life is better? Which world is better? The next life? The afterlife or this world? It's a clear contradiction from one part to the next, right? So what does it mean?
Is the third one that explains?
No, that's not. That's the end of the Mishnah.
Of course, you can't make it simple.
So we gotta go to the Gemara, right, to find out.
So we said that when I do a mitzvah, there's me and there's the mitzvah. Yeah, I do a mitzvah. What's my reward for doing a mitzvah?
I get closer to God.
Okay, that might be a nice benefit, but that's not what the Mishnah says is the reward of a mitzvah.
It probably points toward,
That might be an added benefit. And by the way, there are many Jews that fulfill mitzvahs and don't sin because they're worried about what will happen to them in the afterlife. And that's true,
The more
but that's not the reward for the mitzvah.
the reward for mitzvahs is eventually Mashiach is going to come, and if everybody does all their mitzvahs, then the Mashiach will come. But if nobody does the mitzvahs, Mashiach is never going to come.
So you're suggesting the reward for doing mitzvahs is Mashiach, but what's the reward for the mitzvah? Right now, I'm going to put on tefillin. What's the reward for this mitzvah? Is there a way to identify the reward of this mitzvah? When Mashiach comes, so that's the reward for billions and trillions of mitzvahs. But remember that day that I was throwing up and I was sick and I forced myself to get out of bed and putting on tefillin? How was I rewarded for that? Remember the person who risked their life to teach their kid Torah in the Soviet Union? What were they rewarded for that? I'll go off subject for a second. I went to a shiva call to a Jew that I know in Rogers Park. He lived in the Soviet Union till he was a young teenager. He came out in the early 70s. And he told me that, he'll forgive me if I get all the details wrong, but I believe there was at one point his parents came to visit him for a family simcha. And he comes home and he sees a bottle of Stolichna, you know, the vodka, Russian vodka. He sees a bottle sitting on the table. He knows he never bought it, and he didn't think his parents would buy a bottle of vodka. So he was wondering, how did it get there? So his mother said that a different rabbi in Chicago brought it. He runs Free, Friends of Refugees of Eastern Europe. It's an organization that deals with Russian Jews. Now he lives in Riverwoods, and he runs Free. He brought it. So he says, how do you know him? He's like, what do you mean? He lived in our house. What happened? They lived in Russia. When they came of age, I think it was 8 years old, at that age, you had to go to school. If you didn't go to school, it was a crime. There was no way his parents were going to send him to the government school. But then what do? The parents will get killed, they'll take him to prison, and the kids will end up in school. So what do? So his father took him to a different city, deposited him in someone else's house, and now he's gone. He's lost. And for years, he lived there. His mother had no idea where he went. His father never told his mother. You know why? Could you imagine what would happen if she would get arrested and interrogated to find out where her son is? She'd probably say where he is. She had no clue. This kid didn't know that a kid from the city that he went to came to his house. And his father did the same thing. So this rabbi who lived in his house while he was gone, they had no idea that, right? They had no idea that there's any connection there. So when his parents came to Chicago, he came to visit them. He grew up in their house. He spent years in their house. Why am I saying that? Can you imagine what that mother went through when she lost her child for a few years? Which part of Mashiach will be a reward for that? As opposed to once she came to America and she woke up on Shabbos and went to shul. There's got to be a different reward for those two things, right? So which part of Mashiach? So there has to be, and you can't say there's no reward. That's not a just God who makes us do things and makes us risk our lives and gives no reward. There's absolutely a reward. But how do we identify what the reward is? So the Mishnah says in Ethics of Our Fathers, schar mitzvah, the reward of a mitzvah. Now, usually what we think, how we usually interpret that is, the reward of a mitzvah is a mitzvah. What does that mean? Remember, mitzvah brings us Mashiach, brings us benefits in this world and in the next world. The reward of one mitzvah is that it leads me to another mitzvah and another mitzvah. It's a domino effect, right? The more mitzvahs I do, the more reward I will get. So if I do a mitzvah, the reward is that God will make it easier for me to do another mitzvah. And so eventually I'll get more reward. But again, how do I identify the reward of the mitzvah? There's no way to identify the reward of a specific mitzvah. So Chassidus comes along and gives us a whole new meaning in this term. The Mishnah says the reward of a mitzvah is a mitzvah. It doesn't say it's another mitzvah. So Chassidus explains the reward of a mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. What does that mean? When I put on tefillin, because I'm a soul of this world or of Yetzirah, I'm nefesh. There's me, there's the tefillin. There isn't a real unity between the tefillin. I may get inspired from the tefillin. I may even change my day because of the tefillin. But did I become one with the tefillin? Did I see the divinity in the tefillin? Did I, No, not necessarily. What happens after I pass and I go up to heaven? I go into Gan Eden. I go into these worlds. So there, now me, the soul, and the body, or the body and the mitzvah, which is the soul, we get closer. Remember, because Asiya, there's a very big distance between body and soul. Yetzirah, the distance gets smaller. Bria, the distance gets smaller. And Atzilus, they're one. So the higher I go, the closer I get to the mitzvah, and therefore the more I see what the mitzvah is really about. When I see what the mitzvah is really about, that's my reward. When you give your spouse flowers and she ignores you, you feel ungrateful. There's no reward for my mitzvah, for my action, right? What happens if a week later she tells you, I was going through a difficult thing, but really it changed my whole day. I was able to function the rest of the day. What happens in that moment? That's enough reward for the effort you put in a week ago, even though for a week you were going crazy, how ungrateful she was. But that's enough to turn it around, right? That's what happens when we get up there and we see what our mitzvah really is. That's the reward for the mitzvah. The closeness to God that we achieve because of the mitzvah. Here, we don't see that. There, we'll see it. And that will make the action, that's the reward of the action. You don't need to be paid for the flowers you give your wife. You don't care about you want to become closer. When she doesn't respond, you feel distant. What happens a week later, a month later, a year later, when she finally responds? Now you feel closer. And that's the reward. You're not looking for a payback. You're not looking for something in return. You're looking for the connection. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Doing the mitzvahs, and I think it's from the morning prayer, doing the mitzvah is the reward is in today's world, but the bigger reward is in the world to come.
Exactly. But that exactly proves it. In other words, let's say in a week, your wife says, oh, by the way, it was very meaningful, the flowers you brought last week. That's already a reward. What happens if a week later she says, by the way, it wasn't just, it felt very good. It literally saved me. I was in a very dark place and it really pulled me out. Now, that's a higher level of reward, right? In other words, the more we rise in worlds, the more closer we become to God, the more we appreciate the connection, the more rewarded we are, even though we still did the same mitzvah. Okay, so you're rewarded in this world, sure. God gives you a physical reward. You may even get a spiritual reward out of it. But that doesn't compare to the reward you see after 120. And that doesn't compare to the reward we'll see on Shabbos and Yom Tov when the neshama goes up from the paradise in Yetzirah to Bria. And that doesn't compare to the reward you'll get when Mashiach comes, when we'll actually, because if you think about it, you can't say it's a real reward when your soul gets rewarded in heaven. When will my body be rewarded? When Mashiach comes and we're resurrected, and then the body and soul are together, and we're still one with God, that's when the body gets to experience the reward.
But then there really is no body, it's just souls, isn't it?
No, when Mashiach comes, at least the first stage will be bodies. Resurrection will be. Now, what happens after that? The assumption is that after that, we will become a spiritual world. How long will that take? In other words, how long will we have a physical temple with physical service, with physical mitzvahs in a messianic state? We don't know how long, but the assumption is that eventually the world will become a spiritual world. And again, what form that'll take. So now let's get back to the Mishnah. Unfortunately, we'll have to leave the Tanya text for later, but let's get back to the Mishnah that I read. No, not in the text. We're not going to read the text of Tanya. The Mishnah that I quoted from Ethics of Our Fathers, where we said, 1 hour of repentance and good deeds in this world is better than all the life of the world to come. What is the world to come? What is it? What do I experience in the world to come?
Is Olam Haba?
This is talking about afterlife, not Mashiach.
It's not considered one of the other four worlds.
It is. It's in the world of Yitzira, or if you're higher level soul or Shabbos and Yom Tov, it's the world of Bria. Yeah. Yeah. So what do I experience there? It says you experience the rays of light. Which rays? The light of your Torah and your mitzvahs that you studied. That's what you experience. If you devoted your life to material things and you go up to heaven where you think your soul's going to enjoy studying Torah, it'll be gibberish to it. But if you study Torah in this world, you get up there, you'll study Torah, but it'll be a whole different level. Okay? So what do I experience in the world to come? The soul of the mitzvahs and the Torah that I studied in this world. So tell me, every moment I spend in this world can potentially give me infinite benefit in the world to come. If I don't get to study Torah in this world, I won't get benefit in the world to come. Because remember, the reward is the mitzvah itself. If I don't do mitzvahs, I don't get any reward. No one doesn't do any mitzvahs. But could you imagine the difference between doing 1,000,000 mitzvahs versus 1,000,000,000 mitzvahs? Could you imagine the difference in the reward in the world to come between doing 1,000,000 hours of Torah study? I don't even know if that's possible. 1,000 hours of Torah study versus 10,000 hours of Torah study? The reward will be tremendous. So every additional minute you can get in this world to do another mitzvah to study more Torah is nothing, is the whole world to come is nothing compared to it, because without it, there is no world to come. So that's why the beginning of the Mishnah says 1 hour of repentance and good deeds in this world is better than all the life of the world to come. Because once you die, you can't fix anything anymore. You can't do any mitzvahs. One more mitzvah in this world can give you infinite benefit in the world to come. But 1 hour of bliss in the world to come is better than all the life of this world. In other words, not that 1 hour of in the world to come is better than all the life. No, because without this life, there is no world to come. But where do you experience bliss? Almost none of us experience bliss. And bliss, I mean, from the Torah study and from the mitzvah. It's two separate things in this world. Where do we experience bliss of godliness? That's in the world to come. And you should know, all the mitzvahs you're doing here for the reward in the world to come, just to proportionalize it to you and show you how magnificent it is, 1 hour of happiness, of bliss in that world will be infinitely greater than any happiness you can ever achieve in this life. So if you even doubt that there might be something after life and you want to be happy, invest in lots of Torah study and mitzvahs.
Well, okay,
Because however happy you are in this life, eating shrimp or cheeseburgers or studying everything but Torah, however happy that makes you, if you even think there might be a world to come, know that studying Torah instead of going to the movies or eating kosher instead of the cheeseburger, that will, just that one moment of bliss alone in the world to come will give you more happiness than any bliss you can ever accomplish in this world.
but
So we're talking about two different things.
Yeah.
there are
We'll pause here. I'm just going to